Welcome to Press Conference USA on the Voice of America. Joining me on the program is Dakhil Shamo. He's a broadcaster in VOA's Kurdish service. Our topic, upheaval in Syria. Our guest, noted Syrian human rights activist and dissident Ammar Abdulhamid. Ammar is also the founder and director of the Tharwa Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to spreading democracy, development, and diversity throughout the greater Middle East and North Africa. By working with local activists and journalists, Ammar's anti-regime activities led him to be exiled from Syria in 2005, after which he relocated to the United States. In addition to his work with the Tharwa Foundation, Ammar was a fellow with the Saban Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution, and that's a respected think tank here in Washington. Ammar has appeared on PCUSA twice before to talk about U.S.-Syrian relations, but this is his first appearance since the uprising began in March in the aftermath of the rebellions in Tunisia and Egypt. So we are delighted to welcome him back to the VOA microphones to comment on the ongoing anti-government protests and the brutal crackdown by the Assad regime. We'll also ask him about his participation in meetings with the Syrian opposition in Turkey and elsewhere, as well as prospects for regime change in his native land. And Ammar Abdulhamid, welcome to the program.
Hi, nice to have you.
And I'm delighted to welcome for the first time my colleague, Dakhil Shamo, from the Kurdish service, to talk about, of course...
Dakhil is also a good friend of mine, by the way, so I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Ammar.
And of course, we know there's a substantial Kurdish population in Syria, so we'll look forward to hearing about that. But first, Ammar, I'm just very anxious to get your reaction to the uprising in your native land. Not only the uprising, but the mixture of brutality and half-hearted promises for reform that the government of Bashar al-Assad has used to try to quell it.
Well, basically, I mean, the Syrian people have been waiting for 11 years for Bashar to implement his promises of reform. But the reality is Bashar has turned his back on these promises months into his presidency. He began cracking down against the independent salons, literary salons, and opposition salons that have been established all over Syria and where political issues were being discussed freely for the first time. But that period that was known as the Damascus Spring was very, very short-lasting indeed, and Bashar sort of brutally cracked down on it and put most of the founders and most of the people who took part, an active part in this spring, early spring by now, and he put them in prison. So the reality is his true face and his true colors were revealed early on. Still, the Syrian people, hoped against hope itself that he will come around, that he will see the need for change, that he will see that the kind of arrogance with which the traditional politics of the regime was carried out, were that the time for that has gone, and that the world is changing, and that the demographics on the of the Syrian people have changed. That many of the Syrian people are young; they don't remember or care about the periods of the 80s, basically, where the regime was was cracking down brutally against the Syrian people, killing tens of thousands of them, especially in the city of Hama. That they have no recollection of that, and that they are not necessarily as afraid as the regime thinks them to be. They were hoping that Bashar will see the light. They were hoping that he will indeed at one point see the wisdom of implementing serious reforms that can improve their living conditions, that can allow them to live a dignified life where they don't have to bribe officials to get a simple sort of a paper work approved, or they don't have to feel every time they walk down the streets that there are certain people that they cannot look in the eye, or that the traffic police can have the right to sort of abuse them and treat them as if they're cattle rather than respected citizens. So they wanted to to feel that they can live in a country where their dignity, their basic dignity, is respected. And they hoped that Bashar would be able, to lead the way, because he had projected an image that he was educated in the West, even though he only lived there for less than 2 years, that his wife was sort of British, and that for this reason he's a reformer, he's a modernizer, and he really tried to foster that image. But the actions on the ground, his actual policies, did not reflect any kind of modernity, did not reflect any kind of enlightenment, and he kept really betraying his promises.
Indeed.
And finally, I think the people decided to take matters into their own hand and realize that unless they took the initiative and really went to the streets and began clamoring openly for their rights, no one is going to listen.